In this video, I'm going to share with you a number of key questions that I wish people asked more often when it comes to passing and preparing job interviews. First question is, what if I don't prep my interview? Do I stand a chance? To which my answer would be that it's better not to prep a job interview than to half prep that job interview. Oftentimes, half prepping a job interview makes your answers boring and makes you a very average type of candidate. When you don't prep it, your answers are more on the genuine side, and someone can tell, hey, yes, this guy did not prepare their interview, but they might have that subject matter expertise that we're looking for. Okay. Also, a majority of candidates pass interviews without seriously prepping them. However, that majority is quickly shrinking nowadays because of expectations evolving, right? Second question I'd like to talk about here is how can I fail my interview even though I prepped it? Okay, so let's say you prepped everything for that interview, you're confident, how can you fail it? Two avenues here. First is you hurry up. So by hurrying up, there's various consequences of this. Most common of them could be maybe that you're not giving your best answer. You give your average answer instead of giving your best story. Another pretty common side effect of hurrying up is that you give the totally wrong answer. You screw it up. It does happen, especially for serious types of roles. There are, for executive types of roles, there are tricky questions that you might fail, and then it's game over. It's as simple as that. It does happen. And the other reason, very common reason why people fail interviews even though they prepped it, is because they are insufficiently qualified. It's as simple as that, and it's usually self-explanatory as soon as you're done with your interview. Okay. The third thing I'd like to talk about here is that hey, what if you prepped for, let's say, you have 2 months to prep a job interview and you focus all the time on preparing a story bank? Is that a good approach? Is that focus on preparing a story bank, is that the best possible approach to prepare a job interview? And in fact, I found that the best predictors of job interview success are actually 2 of them. It's both having a story bank, a strong story bank that you can be proud of and that gives you strength, but also role play. So it's actually the combination of these 2 factors that, in my experience, connect the best with interview success. So to answer your question, if you prepare only on the story bank, you could easily get surprised on the questions you're getting asked during the job interview, not understand why the question gets asked, and therefore give a so-so answer to that. Right? Or even reversely, if you want. If you role play over and over and over again for a job interview and don't have a story bank, your answers might become scripted and you might lack substance in what you're talking about. You wouldn't have stories for all the key behaviors the interviewer would be interested in, and therefore lack quality in your output. Right? This would be a side effect. So long story short, don't just do either prepare a story bank, either role play, but rather do both. Okay, this is where the best outcomes happen, right? Question number 4 here. What if I use AI to prepare my job interview? No one ever asked me this thing. Like everyone, if I go on my website, some parts of it look like a casino there. Like I have people using AI for 6 hours straight on my website. Just because, it's pleasant. They feel good about it. They feel, empowered. Like, hey, someone else is doing my job. Someone else is rewarding my answers for me. However, no one ever asked me, what if I use AI? Well, let me tell you what happens if you use AI consistently, right? Well, the first thing you should understand that for someone like me who's interviewing people or who's doing role plays with people, it's a matter of seconds or minutes until I figure out, hey, you rewarded your answers with AI. Usually, becomes even clearer even for you. Is once I ask you a question you have not prepared for, then your answer would be, would sound terrible when compared to AI. But even the AI answers, I would argue, sound a bit fishy, right? So first of all, answering using AI rewarded stories shows in job interviews, and it's a sign of disrespect ultimately, because it's not you, it's called cheating. Okay, so A long story short, AI does not reversely correlates with successful interview outcomes. So the more you use AI, the less likely you are, in my opinion, to pass your job interview. Simple as that. Number 5 here. Where do people fail the most preparing job interviews? Okay, so no one ever asked me these things. So whether I'm doing a coaching session, whether I see people using my trainings, everyone seems to have a very positive attitude. Everything's going to be all right and whatnot. However, from experience, I can tell you that the vast majority of candidates fail to estimate the investment required to become good with interviewing, right? And I'd like to give you 3 examples here. First example is the time investment, right? Vast majority of candidates grossly underestimate the time it takes to achieve something. For example, a story bank, right? 95% of people don't get a story bank by the time they interview, and it's not a story bank they're good with. And if you remember, the previous question is not even only about the story bank, but rather story bank and role play. Okay. Second example would be financial one. For example, you think you need 1 coaching session or 2 coaching sessions. After the first coaching session, you realize you need 10 of them. Okay. So it can be quite expensive to pass the job interviews. If you're reasoning, yes, some people don't spend any money and still pass interviews perfectly fine. It's even in the employer's interest that you don't spend money to pass their interviews, because the more you spend on the interview, the better you'll become, the better your chances to bias your employer to hire you or for them to give you a better offer, right? So, but anyway, so underestimating the financial involved here. And the third is there is this trial and error. There is a roller coaster in motivational stuff. And I'll give an example here. For example, you book a coaching sessions with me, one coaching session with me, and you realize we don't connect well. The vast majority of candidates would either, maybe take a few more sessions thinking they might be wrong or another probably a good majority of you will never take a coaching session again because they think it doesn't work. Well, it turns out that, it's coaching can be a bit of a hit or miss affair, like your first coach might not be your best coach, or maybe you don't need coaching, but you'd rather need training. So there's a lot of trial and error while preparing a job interview, especially for people who don't actually understand what they need to do an assessment. Long story short, how do people fail prepping job interviews the most is because they underestimate the investment it takes with these things, right? And number 6, last but not least, are job interview outcomes predictable? Okay, so I often get asked, hey, Dan, what do you think about me? Will I pass my interview or not? To which my answer is, hey, listen, behaviorally speaking, I think you're doing well or not well. But the thing is, as I previously mentioned, is that you could fail it both because you hurry, but also because of lack of subject matter expertise, right? And on subject matter expertise, I have no idea how to screen you on that one. So that's why for me, it's a gamble to say this. However, for candidates, historically speaking, it's far more predictable for people to see on whether they're going to pass or not pass a job interview. It's also a bit more predictable in the screening rounds, which are traditionally have been a gamble, and it's unfair and whatnot, but still it's a bit more predictable. Employers invest a bit more into that nowadays, probably because there's less opportunity, so they take a more qualitative approach. But more interestingly, for the final interview rounds, in the past, I had tons of people super confident they're going to pass interviews, and they never did pass them. Nowadays, the equation is slightly different. I mean, I see far more people who are confident they're going to pass their interview who do actually pass their interview because, maybe the screening rounds have become, the interview rounds have become more qualitative, or I should say that probably because there are few opportunities, employers can assign their best interviewers as well to screen you, and therefore the process is more equitable and the outcomes are more predictable. But I believe also predictability is also an interesting proposition when it comes to you thinking about this overall process and considering your investment, or how much of your time or how much of your resources will you invest into this process when compared to how predictable a successful outcome is. And it's far more predictable in my experiences of recently. So hopefully you found this interesting, and thank you very much for watching.